There we go.
We got everybody, I think, then? That look right?
Yep, I believe we do. Let's see, 1, 2. Yep, all 7 members.
Okay. All right, Lynn, do you want to record or whatever we have to do to get us officially going and we can start the meeting?
Okay, we're recording and we're streaming.
Excellent. So welcome to the March 15th Historic Review Board meeting for the City of West Linn. Call the meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. And Lynn or John, would you like to do roll call?
Can you do that today?
Sure. Okay, do we have Member Irwin? Scott Irwin?
I am present.
Member Tom Watton?
Present.
Member James Manning?
Present.
Member David Taylor?
Here.
Member Chris Owens?
Here.
Do I see, Member John Steele?
Present.
And Chair Schreiber.
And I'm here as well.
We also have City Attorney Bill Monahan
Present, thank you.
and Staff Associate Planner John Floyd.
Present.
Okay.
Excellent. Our first item on our agenda is public comment related to land use items not on the agenda. Is there any public comments or anyone who is here to make comments about anything that's not on the agenda? I don't see any hands going up, so we'll move on to our public hearing. This is the West Linn Saloon Class 2 Design Review DR22-01 and sign permit SGN-22-04. And for that, we've got our lovely script, and I'll go over that. So good evening. Tonight, we are holding a public hearing regarding the application number DR2201 and SGN-2204 for a Class 2 Historic Design Review and Sign Permit. This is a quasi-judicial decision. Unlike a legislative hearing where personal opinion may come into play, quasi-judicial rulings must be grounded in the relevant code, and if the application meets the code, the board must approve it. The hearing will proceed as follows. After the preliminary legal matters, staff will make a presentation, followed by the applicant, then members of the audience. Finally, there will be time for rebuttal by the applicant. As instructed in the notice of hearing and meeting agenda, those wishing to testify at this hearing should have completed the speaker sign-up form before noon today. For members of the public who missed the speaker sign-up deadline but would like to speak on this item, please complete the web form linked in the agenda and notice of hearing. Staff will send you a link as time allows. I now call to order the public hearing. I'll now ask the city attorney to cover the preliminary legal matters.
Thank you, Chair Schreiber. The applicant has the burden of proving that the application is consistent with the City of West Linn's Community Development Code, its comprehensive plan, and any applicable municipal code provision. The criteria that must be addressed in this hearing are CDC chapters 19, 25, 52, 58, and 99. Any testimony, argument, or evidence that speakers give us must be directed at these criteria or at some other criteria in the code or comprehensive plan which the speaker believes should apply to this decision. Only those who have appeared before the Historic Review Board in person or in writing will have standing to appeal this item to the City Council. Prior to the conclusion of the first public hearing on an application, and that is what this hearing is, the applicant or anyone who takes part in the hearing may request a continuance or ask that the record be left open to present additional information. If there is such a request, the Historic Review Board must either continue the public hearing to a date certain or leave the record open for at least 7 days for additional written evidence, argument, or testimony. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to allow the board and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issues, precludes appeals to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. So at this point, I'm going to ask a series of questions. Do any members of the Historic Review Board wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or a bias in this matter? Please indicate by raising your hand if you'd like to make such a declaration. So I'm not seeing any. Do any members of the Historic Review Board wish to report any site visits or ex parte contacts in regards to this application? Please indicate by raising your hand. Chair Schreiber, yes.
I see this property at least twice to 3 times a day. I live 2 blocks from it, so I drive by the property, never for particular looking at this application. I also have had contact with the architect, Jessica, through the Westland Historical Society. She reached out to us a few months ago about obtaining some photos and some information about the property. I helped direct her to some of it at that time. Was not aware there was an application at the process at that point. She was looking for information. So we didn't have any communication about the actual application at all.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like you've received any information about the specific application that may be different than what is in the record. But if you do identify something comes to mind that differs from what is in the record that you believe needs to be disclosed to the rest of the board, could you please do so at that time?
Absolutely, yep.
Thank you, Chair. Does anyone else have an ex parte contact or site visit they would like to declare? Okay, seeing none, this is the time when members of the audience have the opportunity to raise issues. So my first question to the audience is, does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Historic Review Board to hear this matter? And if anyone does have a challenge to raise, could you please raise your hand using the electronic hand raising, which both Lynn and I will be checking on the participant list. I assume there's no one else on board who's participating that wouldn't be able to raise a hand. Is that correct, Lynn? Thank you.
Yes, you're correct.
Thank you.
Anyone who wants to register a challenge.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not seeing any participants raising a need to challenge on that question. The second and final question is, does any member of the audience wish to challenge the impartiality or ex parte disclosures of any member of the Historic Review Board? And if there is someone who wants to raise a challenge, please do so by raising your hand through the participant list. So seeing none, Chair Schreiber, that concludes the legal matters and we can proceed with the hearing.
Excellent, thank you. So first off, the staff report and presentation. Let's proceed with the staff presentation.
Okay, thank you. I'll get this set up. I'll just read my name into the record. I'm John Floyd, Associate Planner with the City of Westland Planning Department. And for some reason, you can't see this or whatever, just let me know. I can't see the screen while I'm presenting, so thank you. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. So we're here today to talk about facade alterations to the Westland Saloon. It's located at 1731 Willamette Falls Drive and as noted earlier on application DR 2201. So it's a Class 2 historic design review with a sign permit. In such matters, HRB is the deciding authority, which is why we're here tonight. The core code criteria are included in chapters 25 and 58 though secondary criteria related to signage is in 52 and the base zone district in 19. But really 25 and 58 are the meat of the application before you tonight. So just to orient everyone here, the project site is identified in yellow here. This is a map of the Willamette Falls Drive commercial area. The purple boundary is the boundary of the Willamette Falls Drive Commercial Design District. And the blue boundary is the local Willamette Historic District. And the saloon is right in the middle of this overlap area and is really sort of one of the core properties that helped form the genesis of the commercial design district itself. So here's a straight-on picture of the existing building. This photograph was taken a few weeks ago. Just a few background items here. The building was constructed circa 1915 in the Western false front style. This is the style that is required in the current commercial design district guidelines. It was originally constructed as a general store, and the current use remains commercial, although it's been converted to a restaurant for some time. Neither staff nor the applicant were able to locate historic photos of the building to determine the original appearance. Hopefully those emerge at some point, but they are not a part of the application or staff report tonight. Obviously in the foreground are the new street improvements, streetscape improvements with the wider sidewalk and the bicycle track there. Features to note that are going to be changed include the existing facade that covers the majority of the building right now. The center door is also to be relocated, and then the siding and parapet cap is going to be added to the top of the building as well. And I will go into those in greater detail in a bit. Here's an oblique view that captures the sort of side passageway leading to the alley behind the building. I just included this just to give an idea of the side of the building, and the sort of left side of the structure is also to be repainted as part of the application itself. Here's a close-up of the front facade, and I'm not sure if you can see that on the screen here, but one of the reasons for the application is that the building currently has 3 types of wood siding on the front, most likely the result of alterations made over the last 100+ years of its life. You can sort of see a very smooth siding in the middle and just different, and then if you look to the right side and above, you just see different, and actually the left side, you just see how the horizontal wood siding just has different detailing on it. And the applicant is proposing to create a uniform look on the front of the building. And we'll talk about that more in a bit. So here's a summary of the proposed alterations in the packet. I won't go into great detail about any one of them, but we can certainly do that as part of our discussion tonight. So again, one is the relocation, expansion, and inset of the middle entrance. Basically, it'd go from a single door to a recessed double door, and that would be located more in the center of the building to align with windows on the second story. It would be replacement of the existing awning, which is just under 40 feet wide, with 2 smaller awnings, approximately 10 feet and 7 feet in width, which would be centered over the 2 right entrance doors. Also, the application includes 2 different options for siding. And so option 1 is, as described in their application materials, is to basically pick one of the wood siding patterns and just remove everything else that's not consistent with that pattern and replace it with like custom siding to match. The second option would be to remove all the existing wood siding and apply a consistent fiber cement siding, as described in the application. Also, a new parapet cap with flashing on the top of the false front to protect it from the elements. There's a new sign proposed on the upper left corner in a sort of blank area of the facade with new gooseneck lighting to illuminate the sign consistent with city requirements. And then finally, there's a new paint scheme proposed as part of the application as well to give it a little more vibrancy. So here's a sort of here's sheet 3 of the application materials. It's sort of a summary of all of the proposed application alterations. And you can see that the new sign at the upper left, the relocated door, and some of the other changes. And then I can come back to this as we discuss this. But generally speaking, the overall intent of the alterations is to reinforce more of the verticality of the building and to create a cleaner front to the building, and then also to make the entrances a little more identifiable, along with allowing more natural light into the building itself. Although Jessica may want to elaborate on this further in her presentation. Here are excerpts of the application materials. On the left are the proposed colors, which would have a Rookwood dark green siding with sort of sycamore tan trim and an iron or sort of darker doors and windows to offset that, as shown in the previous slide. Also, the awnings here would be of the style they're proposed on the right itself. So I think just to wrap this up here, no public comments were submitted, so under consideration tonight are just the materials in the application packet and anything discussed at the meeting. Also, as noted in my application, staff is recommending 2 conditions. One is that the applicant is all work conform to the plans submitted tonight, and then the second is to mandate use of option 1 of the proposal, which essentially requires wood siding be used in any future work, and that's supported by staff findings 6, 9, 19, and 26. And I think the HRB has had a lot of conversations in recent months about wood siding versus alternative materials, and really in looking at the standards, wood siding really is the most consistent with city requirements. And I think at that point, I'd just like to sort of close my presentation, open up to questions, and let the applicant present their case, and we can go from there. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Any questions from the board for John on the city's staff report? James, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Hey, so the first question I had is on the awnings. We're going from a really nice large awning to 3 small awnings, is my understanding?
Two smaller awnings.
2 smaller awnings.
I can pull that back up.
Do those meet the code requirements of awning length for the frontage of the building?
Yes. So the current code does not specify a width of the awning necessarily, or a percentage of the facade. It just requires an awning.
Didn't we just adopt new code requirements though?
So those are not yet adopted. Those are still under consideration. And so I think if I could direct you to page 15 of the staff report,
Okay.
and then 15 and 16 at the bottom of the page is the standard for awnings. And on the next page 16 is staff finding 20 that that discusses that. And so I would recommend the board consider the language in the standard. And but yeah, so it just says awning, it doesn't say percentage. And as you know, the HRB has been talking about adding some metrics to this to require like a minimum amount, but currently there is not that standard. So.
Okay, and my second question, thank you for that. My second question is with the siding. You know, there are 3 different types of siding on there. It looks like the siding on the right side is kind of the oldest, maybe like shiplap, I guess would be a good way to say it. The center is more of a hardy, 7-inch reveal type of siding. Do we know what is the oldest siding, or, looking at it, looks like the stuff on the right is the older style of wood siding. Do we know which one is the most original or original siding?
So I think as I noted earlier, there are no photographs to reference on this. However, this is probably a good question to pose to the applicant. So
Okay.
I would recommend you do that.
All right, thank you.
David, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
This is a question for John. Back to
Sure.
the whole discussion we had concerning awnings.
Yes.
And maybe I'm confused, but I thought you referenced us to a section somewhere else in the code that required awnings over windows, because our percentages that we ultimately discussed was based on something you'd pointed to the code somewhere.
Okay.
Maybe, you know what I'm talking about?
Let me look into that. I will double check during the applicant's presentation. So I remember that conversation. I don't recall a specific section, but let me double check. And so I can
Thank
certainly
you
do
very
that.
much.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff before we have the applicant's presentation? I don't see any other hands from the board members. John, actually, I had one just clarification. In your report, you had mentioned that there will not be a change in the height of the building. It's just semantics, but it's the
Oh,
applicant
yes.
actually said 3-inch. There'll be a 3-inch add from the parapet. That's
Okay,
your
fair
point.
enough. There's a yeah. It's de minimis. So yeah.
Yeah.
But
Not
that's a very good point though. So thank you for pointing that out. Yes.
Sorry, I just noticed that. When hold on, it is going up by 3. Of course.
So-
I think that as long as there's no other questions, we can move on then to the applicant's presentation. And I'll have the applicant take their presentation.
Thank you. I'm Jessica Iceland. I'm the architect, and I'll be giving a brief presentation. I don't have a PowerPoint or anything. I'm sorry. I figured this was fairly straightforward. Tim Tofty is one of the property owners. He's here as well, and if he may have something to share, and I'll let him do that. But I guess I just wanted to say again, fairly straightforward project in my opinion. The basis for this project stems from the fact that the West Linn Saloon is expanding to take over the space that was formerly, I think it was called Paws. It was a cat shelter. And so they're expanding, and it's their desire to create a more unified sort of building front and a nicer appearance and a more significant sort of front for their business, the West Linn Saloon. So that's sort of what stemmed from this. So there, along with this project, not in front of the HRB, but there will be some interior improvements to the building. So we're doing a fair amount of work to improve the inside of the building as well. So this is a unique building. It's just sort of, it looks a little bit disorganized or somewhat haphazard, maybe from the outside. Again, we have tried to get historic documentation, but we're unsuccessful. But it was our feeling as you looked at the outside of the building that it was really difficult to tell. There was no clearly identifiable entrance. There's windows that really don't align with doors, and the shapes are different sizes. And so it was our goal to try to do something that would be a general improvement of the building and just give it a nicer, street presence and a more definable entry. So that was sort of the overriding objective. In doing the expansion, there were a couple of building code issues too. The primary one was exiting, and with the number of occupants in the space, we really didn't have adequate exits for the building and with doors swinging in the right direction. So that was also part of the reason that we ended up going with the double door, trying to center it in the building. We really couldn't center it though, because again, nothing is quite centered. So we decided by aligning it with the windows above, that made the most sense and added a little bit more logic to the building. But by recessing those doors as well, we were able to get the code required exterior outward swinging doors for the restaurant. So that was part of the reason why we recessed it. Plus, we just felt like it helped to give the building a little bit more articulation. Another thing tied to that was that currently there is a step outside that center door. There's a ramp that goes into the door that's on the end of the facade, that's technically not code compliant, but it is a ramp, it's an existing ramp that provides access into the building. So one of the things that we're doing is recessing the building that will allow us to get a step, basically 2 steps down. So as you walk out the door, you will have a level landing outside the double door and then 1 step down that will be actually sitting in the right of way as it is now. So there were some code issues, egress issues that we were trying to resolve as part of the exterior facade modifications. As for the awning, it's in bad shape and it needs to be replaced. And the building right now with that long awning, it does sort of cut it in half and it makes it look like a very sort of short building. I mean, just the proportions to me seem off. And the owner wanted to try to, again, clearly define the entrances of the building. And we thought by creating 2 smaller awnings above the entries, that helped to define that. It did also allow us to raise that awning a little bit and to allow those windows that are on either between the doors that are currently kind of tucked in under the awning to be more exposed and help to give it a more vertical proportion to the front of the building. So that's part of the reason why we chose to separate that awning from 1 long awning into 2 smaller awnings. In terms of the siding, again, quite honestly, I wish I knew. I'm not sure if it was the V groove siding or like the shiplap siding, which was the original siding. So that's, again, we're trying to get rid of the multiple styles of siding and have a more uniform front. I will say, when we made this application 2 months ago or whenever that was, there was an extreme issue of materials availability. That's part of the reason why we requested approval for both the fiber cement siding and the wood siding, because we did not know if they would be available at the time that we were ready to do this, the improvements. We have recently found out, Tim has found out, that we can actually get both the wood siding and the artisan, the thicker fiber cement siding. So I talked to the owners about this, and they are fine going either direction with the fiber cement or the cedar, whichever HRB chooses to approve. So, and we can get that in, we can get it in a V groove siding. That's the one that we know is available. I think, Tim, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'm not sure that we can get the cedar in the shiplap, but I guess we're open to that. Again, both of them are available now, so makes it a little bit less critical, the approval of both of those. But I would be interested to hear the board's perspective on that, because I know doing a lot of projects in this area, fiber cement siding is always coming up as a question as to whether that will be approved. So I believe that sort of summarizes what we're looking at doing. And at this point, I will open it up to any questions, unless, Tim, you have anything you would like to share.
I'd just like to say thank you for you guys sitting on this board. We appreciate you doing this. We know you're volunteers, and we appreciate your stewardship. With regard to the siding, there's not a huge cost differential. What we think we're going to end up with is something very much like what we put on 1705, which is at the west corner of that same block. That comes from Lakeside Lumber and is their finger jointed siding and finger jointed cedar. We'd be happy to use that. It's a little more money than the fiber cement siding. The reason we kind of wanted the fiber cement siding is that stuff deteriorates a little bit. We put that on 1705 about 15 years ago right now, and it's already looking a little rough. So that was the reason. But to tell you the truth, because this is going to be on the front of the building and on the north side, the finger jointed cedar is fine. So we're real happy to do that. And if you folks would like the awning to be different, I think we're okay with that too. I think Jessica hit the nail on the head when she said what we're trying to do is differentiate those front doors from kind of everything else. And currently we're sort of cutting the building in half, and we're not emphasizing the entry like we'd like. And so we think the way to do that is by way of splitting the awnings. But if you folks would like to have it differently, that would not shake us up too much. So we're happy to be here, and we're excited about improving the building. It's the first building that we've ever owned that we ever owned in West Linn, and we're glad to kind of straighten up a little bit. It's been a bit of a mess for a long time. We're actually going to side the back of it as well and kind of straighten the whole building out while we're at it, if you guys will approve that for us. And again, I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So at this point, we have questions from the board for our applicants. I saw James, I saw your hand pop up. If you want to go ahead and begin.
Thank you, Danny. Question about the recess for the double doors. How deep is that recess?
It's just 3 foot 2 inches, so just enough to allow those doors to back within the recess.
Okay, so the doors won't access into the sidewalk area?
No.
Okay. And then you said there will be a step into the sidewalk area like currently. But don't you, I guess, don't you want a ramp like the other door? So you could have better egress for people, or do you want that step? Seems
In a perfect world, we would have the ramp, but because there's roughly about an 8-inch step up, if we put a ramp in, we would actually, it's like 9 inches, I think, actually. So it's beyond what we could do without having a landing and then having it come out like having it run like 6 to 9 feet long within the right of way. And then you'd have to, because it's over 6 inches, you'd have to have a railing. And quite honestly, it would get very messy and I think distracting to the front of the building. And it would be, again, that would be a question for engineering, whether they would want to approve a ramp and railings in the right of way. Because we have the ramp on the existing door that's closer to the bar, we felt like leaving that there and leaving the step that's currently there now where it is would provide a better front and a better look for the building.
okay. Thank you for that. So to you and to Tim, I do appreciate the comment of the fiber cement siding versus the cedar siding. My preference would be cedar siding, like on the corner on 14th there. That's a nice looking building. That's a kind of a period correct siding versus what some of the fiber cement siding is. So that's just my input. And then I would like to go back to the awning. If John had found anything new on that.
No, I just did a keyword search of the code again, and the only standard I could find is that I referenced earlier on pages 15 and 16 of the staff report. That's standard 11 that speaks about awnings, and that's all I could find.
Okay.
I know the conversation being referenced, but I believe that conversation was about tying glazing standards percentages to the awnings, but anyways, but yeah, I'll stand by that standard again. So.
Okay. And my preference on that, currently it has a large awning, and we've had a lot of discussion about awnings in the past. The more awning, the better to protect people from the elements is always preferred. So that's all I have, Danny. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. And I had a question for you as well about the step. And you're going to retain, just so for clarification, you're retaining the existing step, but you're going to expand it into the right of way. Is that correct?
No, it currently is within the right of way, so we won't be expanding it.
But you'll be making it wider though, because right now it's only a single door, right?
Oh yeah, so the width of the step will be expanded, but the depth into the projection into the right of way will not be expanded. I think it might be that that step is currently, it might be like 9 inches deep, and so I take that back. We might be expanding it like by 3 inches to get a full 12-inch step into the right of way.
Okay. And then the other question, or at least according to our code, one of our requirements is the retention of original materials, and that is a very well defined in the code that the goal is to always retain original material when possible, and even when it is decayed, we're supposed to repair it, not replace it. And that is one thing that we want to find out from you of what you will do, or how in the plan do you guys plan to retain as much existing material within the building, whether it's original or what's already on the building.
And are you talking on the front facade?
Correct, yeah.
And we would love to do that. The difficulty that we find is that, again, with currently the 3 different profiles that are on the building, even if we were to pick one, and that would probably be the route that we would try to take, would be to compare the lakeside lumber profiles with the existing, one of the existing profiles on the building to see if they are a match. Quite honestly, I think that's unlikely. So that's why on the building now, you'll look and you'll see that where the sidings, but there's, you know, a piece of a 1x6 or a 1x8 vertical trim that basically just covers that seam. So I don't think there's a way to do that short of custom milling siding to match the existing, which would be extremely cost prohibitive to try to match that. So again, I think what we could do is we could see what's available in terms of the cedar siding from Lakeside, bring it out to the building, see if it matches any of the existing siding that's in good shape, and then try to utilize that. But I just don't think that that's likely. But the trim, any of the trim, again, the windows are all remaining. So all of the wood trim on the windows and the doors where that existing diagonal recess is for the single door, that will all be retained. Again, and I should say to the extent possible, because some of that, as we tear it off, might be, you know, cracked, it might be deteriorated. So in those cases, we would replace that with like material, wood material.
I guess I still have the challenge of the code saying the retention of materials, and it doesn't say if it doesn't look good. It just says it's got to be retained. We got to keep the original material, and there's not any leeway to say it's just unappealing to the eye. We're going to rip it down and put it, you know, something that's appealing. So that's where I'm having a little bit of difficulty trying to figure out how we can apply the code and make sure we're going to follow the rules to get it to that point. I don't know. We'll have to discuss that as the board, but we'll have to figure that one out. Any other questions from any of the board members? Scott, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, this definitely is a tricky project. I mean, you know, I like symmetry, and this building it's been a visual challenge for me for many years, and so any effort to address it is very welcome, and good luck with the finalization of it. You know, and just to, you know, from my glean over all the topics we've discussed real quick, from my perspective, it appears that the wood on the either end of it is more recent. And if you look at the picture on page 3 of the staff report, and if you zoom in, I guess there, you can tell that the wood in the center, kind of to the left there, looks the most aged. And I suspect that's because it is the oldest wood, and likely the most original. But it also looks pretty weathered in comparison to the wood on either end of the building, which matches and looks nicer, which I would imagine because it's probably several decades younger. So that's just going to be my observation there. I think the one thing that, yeah, is important is that you have good ADA access. I mean, you know, the double doors, if it's logistically not going to present that opportunity, then the door on, I guess, the right side, looking at it face on, provides that access. And I think that's, you know, that meets code, I would imagine, for that. As far as, you know, because, you know, symmetry and achieving a new level of balance with the building, I think is tricky with the windows, you know, because we don't want to just say, okay, just yank out all the windows and put in new windows that line up properly. And I think the answer to that is an awning that runs the entire face of the building. And so I will just throw that out there as something for you and Tim to consider, is that you just run an awning the whole length. And to distinguish the main entrance itself, of course, pink color, any type of, I guess, business label on the front door glass. I'm not sure if code allows that or not, but there's definitely other ways to distinguish it other than using the awning. And the reason why I suggest this is because the whole HRB, we actually got together in person not that long ago. We risked life and limb to get COVID. We didn't, and we met met down there, and we walked it together. It was nice. I mean, other than I found out that I'm definitely the shortest member of the board, but we informally figured out that 5 feet from the front of the building is it seems to be the new standard that's being established down there. It is also most practical based off of exterior seating that we've noticed, where you can still have a table on the outside but still provide some coverage for pedestrians. Planters, as we know, are not allowed, but there they are, and they eat up walking space for pedestrians. And so if the awning extends 5 feet, you still have coverage for pedestrians, and the illegal planter can still be there. And I know Tom Watton is a big fan of coverage, as someone who is frequently a pedestrian in the Old Town area. So I'm just going to throw that out there, because as you can see on page 3 with the awning, it does a good job of covering up at least the top side lack of symmetry for the windows, not the bottom side, but at least the top side. And so I think that smooths over that visual effect. And so I just wanted to throw that out for you, because the board, one change that we are planning on making, as we have discussed, not finalized, but as we have discussed, is to make it so the awning would be required to cover 80% of the facade as a minimum. And so in potential anticipation of that change, with the 80% coverage of the front, as well as the 5 feet from the facade, I recommend that if you find that's within your budget and that design-wise that works for you, we highly recommend that you apply that standard, so you will be in compliance with what will likely be the new rule. And with that, I'm going to stop with my comments. Thank you very much.
All right. Any other questions of the applicant from any of the board? James, is your hand up, or is that new, or is that old?
No, I wanted just to kind of follow up on what you had said, if I could, with the, keeping of the older materials. And I just wanted to get clarification. Are you planning on reciting the whole front facade, false front, or just the areas that aren't matching, at street level, like Scott was just talking about?
I tell you what, I'm dying to lose that vertical like Scott referred to, and I'm just not sure we can preserve much of what's there. I'm not going to mislead anybody. I think the plan is to take the siding that we can come as close to as we possibly can, that we can and lakeside to the high end place to get it, and do the front of it with that. That's kind of the plan. If we end up saving some, I think we're going to end up with some vertical in it that I think is really going to take away from the symmetry that I think Scott and I are both trying to get at. And I'm 5'6", by the way, just so you know. And so short guys are okay on my team. And if we want bigger awning, a bigger awning in terms of coverage, I don't know what we have now in terms of actual distance from the building. I don't know if that's 5 feet or not. Maybe Jessica would know. But we got 4 now. Is that where we are?
Yes.
I'm not opposed to that. I want to talk to our tenant if possible. I'm a little disappointed Bob's not with us tonight. But they kind of got some thoughts on awnings too. I don't think there's any plans for any lettering on them or anything, and I think they're going to look very much like they are. But as far as size is concerned, we'll go back to him. But we'll certainly we want to do what's right by everybody. So we'll let us know what that is. We'll make that happen.
Okay, thank you, Tim. If there is good siding on that whole facade of the front, could that be used on the side along the sidewalk in between you and the next building, or?
Maybe. I don't have great luck pulling that stuff off. We took it off of 1705, which is a building down on the corner. We gave it all to Habitat for Humanity. But to be honest, it ends up being really dried out. When you start pulling that stuff off, it's a real problem. Even if guys know what they're doing and use heat guns and water and the whole thing, it's still awful problematic to reuse that. I'd like to tell you differently, but we have a little bit of experience with it, and it's tough to reuse that stuff.
Okay, so since you brought up the other building, I hope that this one doesn't fall down, to be honest.
Yeah, we're not planning on raising this one up in the air, so I think we can not drop it like we did the last one. And I remember that real well. That was almost exactly 17 years ago right now. It was March 11th of 2005 that building fell down.
Yep, I was there.
So was I.
All right, thank you.
We hope we got that one right by everybody's estimation. It gets painted this year, by the way. And we certainly commit to getting this one right. If we get the chance to do it like we want to do it, I don't think anybody will be disappointed with the results.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
Tom, I saw your hand up. It went down. Do you have a question, Tom Watson?
Oh, Tim just kind of answered it a little bit on the building, the 1705. I'm looking with regards to the siding. I'm actually looking at, there's a vertical line on, well, let's go to the proposed building that we're talking about, and there's a vertical line that runs just right of center, and it's on this, there's two different sidings that were put together on either, one style on one side of that vertical. I wouldn't even call it trim, but that's kind of, it's a break line that was done in order to salvage probably some of the existing siding against some new siding that probably had to be replaced many years ago. And, again, I appreciate your honesty, Tim, and the fact that you're saying to salvage some of this or any of this on the front is probably not realistic. So I'm in favor of you guys have proposed some of the higher end concrete stuff like the V groove or the beveled channel or even the shiplap. I mean, that's what you've used on the other side as cedar, on that other building as cedar. They've made that higher end concrete siding that looks pretty nice and it weathers well. So I'd be in favor of saying yes to that material. And the question I have for you though is would you be using the same material on the rear and some of the other parts that you guys are going to be working on? Just out of curiosity, I don't know that we have jurisdiction over telling you what you can or can't do in the alleyway. I was just curious if you'd be using the same material or would you go something different?
I think we want the front to look right, exactly right, and that vertical will disappear if you let us use all the siding that we want on the front. As for the back, we'll use the difference in cost about 25%, and there's not tons of this on the building. So as a real dollar number, it isn't a huge, that isn't the issue. The issue is what's going to wear the best. And frankly, I'd like to put the fiber cement on the side and on the back if that's okay, just from a wear standpoint. We did, I don't know if anybody's walked out on the back deck of the Westland Saloon in a long time, but that was finger joint real cedar siding, and it is really deteriorated badly back there. And so we'd like to use hardy plank on the side and on the back, and use the real cedar stuff on the front if that works. If not, we can do the real cedar everywhere. Like I say, it's not a tremendous amount of material. It's not a tremendous amount of dollars. It's just kind of what we think will wear the best. And it takes the paint crazy. It takes the paint really well too, which is nice.
Okay, thank you. And you're aware that some of the other buildings like Icon's done, they are using the concrete. So it's not unheard of to propose the concrete on the front. And I know that you're going to get mixed reviews with that, but I'm just making that statement. Thank you.
I appreciate that, but we will do the cedar on the front. It sounds like that's the consensus. That's fine. But if we can do the fiber cement, the rest of it, that'd be great.
If I can just clarify too, to make sure, as part of the application, we did submit the brochure for the Hardy Artisan, and I just wanted to make it clear, as I think Tom mentioned, what we are proposing with the fiber cement is not the simple Hardy, lap siding. It's the Artisan, which is a much thicker siding. It has like it's, in fact, I know you probably can't see it. I know you can't, you don't have this, but this is the Hardy Artisan, which is a lot thicker. It's a tongue and groove siding. You can see the profile. Quite honestly, it's significantly more expensive than the Hardy plank, and it wears much, much better. It would be a smooth siding. Again, I think as Tim said, we could do the cedar or the fiber cement, but it's a question that I appreciate hearing your discussion on that. And one other comment, if I could make, just in terms of the concern of wanting to retain any of the material on the front. If you look at the photo on the front, and this is kind of ties in with the idea of running a continuous awning. If you look at that photo of the front, you can kind of see where that awning, because as much as you try to align those various sidings, they're not quite right. And that continuous awning, in my opinion, really exaggerates the fact that that's not quite level. And if we can replace all the siding with whether it's cedar or Hardy, particularly if you would like us to run a continuous awning, it's going to look much better with all new material on the front of that facade. Otherwise, I'm afraid you're going to see those little tiny gaps and breaks, and it's going to be more noticeable with the continuous awning.
John Floyd, I see your hands up. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to respond to a couple of comments here I've heard, just so the board is aware. So just one thing, if siding changes are being proposed to the side and rear, I just wanted to clarify that those are subject to HRB review. So that's not included in the current application. If the applicant wants to expand the application to do that, we can do that. But I would recommend the application materials be modified to reflect that prior to a decision, or that a new application be reviewed at some future date. So I just wanted to clarify that, to make sure we're clear in terms of what's under consideration tonight, is that we only have the front facade technically under consideration. I think also too, I just wanted to point out that we're actually pretty early in our 120-day clock. And so we got this to the HRB pretty quickly. So technically speaking, we actually have until June to render a final decision. So if for some reason the HRB would like to continue this for additional information, investigation or whatnot, that's something on the table. It could also provide the applicant time to provide more materials. And actually starting next month, we're going to be returning to hybrid meetings. So for example, if you wanted to see material samples in person, that's something that could be done. For example, maybe some of the either the wood products or the non-wood products to review in person. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we're not under the gun to make a decision tonight. So, and then I think my final comment, just a reminder that this, as we're talking about comparable buildings, this is one of the older buildings in downtown in Main Street area, and that it's in the historic district. And so when you're making comparisons, just remember that it's not a new structure necessarily. But again, the decision is on the HRB. I just wanted to make that reminder. So thank you.
And Jessica, did you have a
Yes,
comment?
and I'm sorry, but I guess in terms of the continuance, and Tim can maybe chime in, we have already submitted a building permit, the interior improvements to this project. And it's sort of a tricky process that we're going through, because the owner's trying to get the inside work done now, knowing that he can't get permits for the facade work until he has HRB approval. So I feel like if we could get an approval, even if it ends up just being for the front facade, the siding now, that would allow us to continue to move forward with the project. And then we could come back for the side and the back at a future time. Does that make sense, Tim?
And after we hear from public comment, we'll have an opportunity to talk about continuances if that's something that you're interested in doing or something that the board asks for, but noted that you'd like to try to proceed if possible.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicants? And HRB members will have a conversation after the testimony about our discussion. So, but before we close on the applicants, I just wanted to make sure there's any other comments or any more questions from our board. All right, so then we'll move on to the public testimony. Thank you very much, Jessica and Tim, for your application. As instructed in the notice of hearing and meeting agenda, those wishing to testify at this hearing must have completed the speaker sign-up form on the website before noon today. Each citizen commenter has 5 minutes to testify. The neighborhood association representative will have 10 minutes. When I call your name, staff will unmute your microphone. Please confirm that we can hear you and state your name and address for the record. Staff will tell you when you have 1 minute remaining at the end of testimony. Board members may ask questions of the public commenters. Please keep your responses brief and to the point. With that, the first speaker that we have, I think the only speaker we have, is Jody Carson. We will begin with Jody Carson. Jody, go ahead and unmute and begin.
Members of the Historic Review Board and the applicant. Thank you very much for allowing me to testify. My name is Jody Carson. I live in the Willamette Historic District in West Linn, and I am representing the Willamette Main Street, Historic Willamette Main Street, as chair of the Design Review Committee. And the Design Review Committee would recommend that you approve this application. This is one of our prime historic buildings on our main street. And the design that is being proposed is the building is it's going to maintain the shape and design of the building structure, which we think is very important. And we feel like the relocation and changing of the sizing of the door is appropriate. We would like to recommend you go with option 1 in terms of wood siding for the front of the facade. We do like the paint choices that have been proposed. We did not really discuss the awnings. I think in general, we like having the longer awnings, but we don't have any stand we're going to take on the awnings. We just want to make sure it's wood siding. And the other thing that I would like to note is that I'd like to raise whether or not there's some other type of lighting that might be used in the front of the building, because the application notes that it's going to be a canister lighting above the door. That doesn't feel very historically appropriate, and would like to see if there'd be some other type of lighting that could be used at that doorway that would be more complementary to the building historic front. And so I think that we basically are in support of this application and really think an improvement in this building will be a real positive asset to our main street. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any of the board members have, thank you, Jody. Any of the board members have any questions for Jody? I don't see any there.
And there may be a picture of that building on the plaque that's in the front of that building. There's that brass plaque, and we used historic photos. But I haven't looked at that plaque for a long time, so I can't say if you can tell what kind of siding it had. So anyway.
If I could interject here, I did take a look at that plaque, and the photograph, as I recall, is pretty recent. So, but I did take a look. So
I couldn't remember if we got an old one for that one or not. So okay, great, thanks.
Any questions for Jody from anyone? I don't see any, but does the applicant wish to respond or rebut the testimony?
I would just say, I think that if we can look for another light, that the objective with the light above the door was it's going to be recessed, and we were trying to keep the soffit as low as possible, but I'm sure that there's something else. So maybe we can look for a different type of light if that would, be something the board would like us to do.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions of Jody or the applicant? All right, moving on, addressing requests for continuances at this point. If there's any options for any continuances, either from the board or from the applicant, we have questions for there. There's options of one option to request no continuance and move directly to our questions from staff, and then, or there's the option to request a continuance at the public hearing. Any motion or anyone need to make any continuances? And then, does staff have any further comments or clarification regarding this application? That would be you.
I would say no. I would just refer back to my last comments a couple minutes ago. Thank you.
All right. And finally, does any member of the board have any questions for staff or the applicant before we close the public hearing? So just I'll remind all of the board members that after we close the public hearing, we can't ask questions back to the applicant. So this is our chance to address any questions back to the applicant. All right, with that, then we will close the public hearing. That is now closed. And now we begin deliberations of the Historic Review Board members. Are basically our chance to talk about it, make a motion, or make any comments or discussion about the application. My only comment, I'll begin, is I'm a little bit concerned about the retention of materials. We have to recall that this is not just in a Chapter 58. This is not a new property. This is a historic property that's within the Chapter 25 guidelines, basically within the historic district guidelines. So it answers more to what the houses answer to. If we remember, there's a difference between Chapter 58 and 25. So we're talking about here, we want to retain the history, not duplicate it or replicate it, which is a little bit of what we talked about in Chapter 25. I know we've had this conversation before between replication of history and retention of history. And that's one of those things that's fairly clear in code, is that we need to do everything we can to maintain and retain history. I know that it may not be aesthetically pleasing and it's difficult to do and expensive to replicate, you know, the stuff that's missing, but we've already had the same problem with other properties where people have covered or ripped down siding because it's just cheaper and easier to replace it than it is to try to repair and patch. So that's just my opinion on it. As a homeowner in the neighborhood, I've had to spend extra money to try to get wood siding that matches to replace pieces that are missing versus just ripping it all down and putting on hardy plank, which is a lot easier. But it is fairly strict in the code there that we need to try to retain the materials. That's, I don't know, that's just my personal opinion on it. The awning part, I agree with what Scott was saying, that the code is changing that direction, as well as I would think that the business would want to be able to have maximized outside seating for summer months, and more awning cover I think would make more sense. But again, it's not clear in the code, but the code is heading in that direction. It would behoove them to try to keep it. That's just my thoughts. Anyone else have any? Tom, go ahead.
Hey, Danny, you know what? I totally agree with you, and appreciate, you know, that you brought it up with regards to the materials. This thing's tough because I have the luxury of Google Earth right now, and I hopefully that's okay to be doing in a meeting like this. But as they had said earlier, there's three different kinds of siding on this facade. And what's interesting is the closer I look, the more I see that the upper left, the way it's kind of buckled and bubbled and is probably the actual oldest of the bunch. And I think over time and repairs on this building, there was attempts made. And again, that vertical piece that divides two different kinds of siding, the stuff to the right of that actually looks newer. I'm kind of at a, you know, and then the stuff below the awning to the left of that vertical board looks to be different as well. Just between that vertical board and the single door. So it's a challenge, and I, I don't I don't want to go on, but I see that they're dealing with a challenge of, in my mind, what I can see is three different kinds of exterior siding. So I'm not sure how to chase that, and which and to be able to choose which one is original without more research. But either no matter what, I have a feeling that that there's going to be some siding modifications here. Thank you.
James, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I did the same thing, Tom, so don't worry about looking at Google Earth. That top left-hand side, you know, Tim might not want to hear this, but it looks like that is water damaged to me. And that might be part of the reason they want to put a top cap on there. And they won't know if that's damaged until they tear all the siding off of there. And as he stated earlier, you can tear it off, but it might become kindling, you know. So as Danny, as much as I would like to see all that siding retained and used somewhere else because it is historic, it might be better to go down the path of new cedar on the front of this building. And then if you take a look at the Google Earth image street view, that awning has dips and wows in it to try to match the different layers of the siding that are there. And for symmetry and everything, I would agree with the architect and say that, you know, you get that level, you get the awning level, and it's a period correct wood siding. Might not be period wood siding, but period correct wood siding. I think we'd all, you know, as a board and as a community, be happier with the look of that building. So my 2 cents there.
So how do we justify 25060 number 2, the retention of historic material, removal and alteration of historic materials shall be avoided?
Well, I don't think we can honor that if we're going to remove it to see if there's water damage on that false front.
And it pretty clearly states right after, whenever possible, deteriorated materials and architectural features shall be repaired rather than replaced. It's fairly clear in the code that they've addressed this. Obviously, it's happened before, and the code says
true. We can put a stipulation in there to say that they shall retain or use this wood again. But if it comes off instead of one piece, it comes off in 10 pieces, then that shall, you know, kind of goes away.
Although, except for it's repaired, and that's, you know, we can repair shredded wood. I'm not saying it's the best thing in the world to do, but it can be happening. Versus, we have the same problem. We've talked about this before. That we're encouraging reconstruction to damage the entire thing because it's cheaper and easier to accidentally have the whole thing ripped down and fall down than it is to try to repair it. You know,
I'm not disagreeing with you, but to Tom's point, there's 3 or 4 different types of material up there, and which one do we repair it to?
Yeah.
And you know, I like I said, I'm all for the old material. You know, I'm all for that. But I don't think that old material is going to come off the front of this building, enough of it to repair, even if it breaks. And then if you can repair what breaks, then what do we do with the other 2 or 3 different types of material that are on the front of the building that we're trying to, you know, make period, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, James.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'll say it again. I would love to have all the old wood on the front of that building, but I don't think it's feasible, to be honest. My opinion.
Chris, you have your hand up.
Yeah. So, I think if we could have been able to determine which is original and which is the newer, whether it's 50 years old or 30 years old or however, I think there might be a point of legitimate debate here. But otherwise, I mean, at some point we have to realize these are wooden structures and wood doesn't last forever. no matter how it's cared for. And if we find that some of the wood is damaged, then trying to replace it and then asking the owners to incur additional maintenance or repair costs down the road because they used a far less than optimum solution doesn't make a lot of sense. So I would take you back to the USS Constitution. You know, it's still the oldest commissioned warship in service. It doesn't have a single piece of original wood left on it because they've all been replaced over time. Wood just doesn't last. And so I agree with retaining the original and the historic materials as long as it makes sense to do so and we don't jeopardize the integrity of the overall structure in order to try to fill something that isn't even aesthetic because we can't tell if it's new or replacement. I was originally of the thought that, you know, in order to make the repairs and the necessary replacement, that we ought to consider allowing option 2, the fiber cement, because you can get a historic look with that, with the premium stuff especially. But if we're going to restrict to the wood, we ought to be reasonable about picking one style that is available and that is practical, and allow them to get on with it.
Thank you. Scott, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing that, you know, we're not hitting on, which, you know, I just wanted to point out, is that the material must, you know, the idea is that the material should be preserved. It doesn't say that the material must be kept in the exact same spot where it was before. Okay, so I just want to point that out. So I think then there is concurrence that the wood to the left of that vertical line, where, you know, just where it says stake on the awning, and then going across to that other vertical line where the awning ends, I think we can all pretty much agree that's the original wood because it looks the most weathered. You know, and it's very clear that wood is several decades older than the wood on the edges. And so in an attempt to preserve that wood, you know, it could be taken down, reviewed, we determine what wood could be preserved, what wood needs to be thrown out because it's rotted, and then maybe use that to reface that small section on the left side there with the door and the window with the yellow framing, and then reface that with the original wood, and that way the main section could be refaced with new cedar or the fiber. I personally am a fan of cedar, so I'll just throw that out for everyone to consider.
And John Steele, or James, is that your hand up again, or is that from before? I'll James' hand first, but John, if you want to go ahead and.
Sorry, I was on Google Earth also looking at that. And Chris makes Scott makes Chris made a good point too, but Scott just made a great point about reusing that material, and a thought came into my head of your new little portico indention. Can we frame that in, that little, you know, those two little indentions where the doors are? Can we use old material if possible in those? That might give us some short pieces that would side that little area.
And John Steele, you had your hand up too.
Yeah, briefly, I very much concur with what has been said about wrestling with this problem. So I won't rehash all of that, but I do tend to I tend to agree that, number one, it doesn't say it has to be in the exact same spot it was. If the intention is to preserve historic materials for some reason, that doesn't bother me that it's somewhere else. And two, we have the issue of, okay, point on that picture to the original material. And with complete confidence, you're pointing to the original material. I think that's very true. And I think that's the reason we have a group of people like us interpreting the code, because the code can't be written 100% declarative in every conceivable situation. That's why I think this conversation and having a number of people talk about it, think about it, and ultimately I would hope we come to what is a reasonable interpretation of that, not a black and white, all cases kind of interpretation. And so I would say, let's just find cedar trees that are over 100 years old and use them for the siding. So let's cut down some old growth cedar, and then we'll have 100-year-old siding on the building. I'm being facetious, but I think the conversation is excellent. I'm just saying, but I don't want some rule to suddenly say, oh, well, we have to make extraordinary measures to try to save it. And there may be some other options. Anyway, that's my sort of, I concur with the great conversation.
Good point. The other thing that I know you guys have heard me say this many times, I'm always concerned about, and I think Scott might mention it, or maybe it was James, but the structural integrity of the building is when we start pulling off old siding, it can compromise the structural integrity of buildings. We've already seen that happen to others in the neighborhood. So when I hear immediately that people are going to peel off siding, alarm bells go off about keeping the integrity of the building, because obviously it's doing something that's going to hold up something. And I certainly would hate to have that come down, and then all of a sudden we're having to deal with having to rebuild a building again from scratch, which again does not maintain the historic integrity of the construction of the building. I know we don't have any way of requiring that in the code, but the intention of the code is to try to maintain and keep these buildings. And if we allow for folks to rip down siding and pull down walls on the exterior of the building, that's going to cause some challenges. So I don't know how we can put that into our final approval, but somehow we want to keep the building up. I mean, I don't know if that's, John, I know we've talked about that before, John, of how to put that in there as a requirement of the construction, but I'm just concerned about that again. As soon as we start pulling down walls and exteriors, we're going to have potential of integrity of the structure being compromised. Any other board members have any other questions or comments or discussion points?
Danny, it's James.
Oh, James, okay, I saw your hand up again.
I just want to kind of reiterate what you just said, because I do have a concern about this building's structural integrity once the siding comes off. Because since this building was originally built with the western false front, there is a good possibility that underneath that siding is vertical wide plank that goes from street level all the way to the top. And that is a structural board in this old type of construction. I've seen that a lot in some of these houses in Willamette, where the wide plank goes through the first floor, through the second floor, and it basically ties that wall together. Yeah. So, Tim, you and I can't really have a discussion right now, but if it was me, I wouldn't tear the whole front of the building off. I would tear 4 feet at the bottom and start there and move up in chunks to maintain structural integrity of this front. Because if you take that all the way off, to Danny's and my concern, then that building could rack, and once that building racks, then you're coming to us to build a new building. So that's my concern. That's all I got at this point.
Scott, you had your hand up next, I think, and then John after that.
I wanted to go ahead and make a motion on the application, but I will, of course, pause for John's final comment here.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, I would like to second James's comments too, and it would seem to me that we could add in conditions that would say that if you're going to remove the siding, it has to be done in a way that never jeopardizes the structural integrity of the building. And put the onus on them if they need to bring in an engineer or whatever is involved. You cannot take off siding that threatens the structural integrity of the building. And I've got to believe in this day and age, an engineer could easily go in and take a look without ripping it all off first and say, yeah, here's how you're going to have to approach the renovation so that you're never, because I also doubt a business owner is that as inclined to have the whole building collapse, especially if they're already doing the interior remodel. They're probably not highly motivated to have the building collapse. But anyway, that's my 2 cents is let's put in some sort of condition. And I'm sort of seeing affirmative nods from the owner and so on saying, yeah, I think we can manage that.
City Attorney Bill Monahan, did you have a comment on how we can phrase that or address that?
Well, actually, Chair, my concern is if the board is going to consider placing a new condition that has not been discussed during the course of the hearing, that we reopen the hearing and allow the applicant to comment on that proposed condition to make sure that we prevent damages being sought in circuit court should the board impose that condition.
Perfect. So then we need to reopen the public hearing portion, right?
Yes, only for that one purpose, to discuss the proposed condition.
So if we want to put that, I guess the question is, do we want to put a condition on it? Scott, I know you were going to make a motion, and John, you discussed it. Should we? What do you think, guys?
My motion would tie into what has been brought up regarding structural integrity. So I concur with the city attorney to go ahead and reopen the hearing to touch that subject.
James, before we do that, James, did you have a question or a comment on that?
Yeah, no, I think we need to reopen it just for that question as Bill stated.
All right, so if that is correct, I don't have a script on this one. So we'll we'll head back to reopening the public hearing. Do we just pick it up then, I guess, with back to the application? John, I'll refer to you on that, where we need to go, or Bill.
So Chair, if I may, would be reopening, the board would be reopening the public hearing to allow the applicant the opportunity to respond only to the proposed, or rather, only to the suggested condition of approval, which could be part of the board's motion for whatever action it takes. So just for that purpose.
Okay. So then I guess we'll reopen the public hearing. And does the applicant want to respond at all to the suggestion of the conditions?
Yes, I would like to.
We have
respond.
absolutely no interest in not preserving the building to the best degree that we possibly can. I was sick when the other building was dropped by our contractor. We will not make that mistake or anything like it again. We're not picking this up in the air, and we'll absolutely agree to any stipulations about pulling off 2 boards at once or 1 board at once or 4. I'm a little worried about what's behind it as well, and so I think it makes a ton of sense for us to do exactly that, make sure it's all tied together before we do anything in terms of tearing it apart. With the whole objective here is to get our tenant back in business and get him going. And the last thing we want to do is slow that down by screwing something up. And so we will not do that. We'll get it right. And you can certainly stipulate that in anything that you impose on us. We're happy to make sure that this is done correctly and have no interest whatsoever in goofing this up. We think the building on the corner, 1705, was one of the oldest buildings in town. We're sure this one is, and we have no interest in anything other than preserving it correctly.
I think it's great, and I've worked with Tim for many years, and I have the utmost respect for him and the way that he does things. I agree that they don't want this to happen. For what it's worth, part of what we're doing on the inside will include structural, particularly lateral improvements to the entire building. So that will include sheathing. So I think that's part of what we're doing. That said, I have a bit of a concern about stipulating anything regarding structural improvements to the building. With all due respect, I feel it might be beyond the purview of a historic review. And I have some concerns about identifying any kind of construction means and methods as part of an approval. I know, we legally can't stipulate construction means and methods. That's the responsibility of the contractor. So I guess, and I'm not an expert at this, maybe John Floyd can assist here, but I have a little bit of a concern with having a stipulation about the structural integrity as part of a historic review process and approval.
John, did you have a address on that?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yeah, so I think a couple of things here. I mean, conditions have to relate to standards of approval. I believe just off the bat here, section 25.130, the demolition by neglect standard, could be a place to tie the condition. I think, as the applicant stated, it's the board should be careful about stipulating construction means and methods. At the same time, it's not unreasonable to ask for them to perhaps provide some sort of information demonstrating that the building will be structurally sound during construction. Just thinking off the top of my head here, this could be one possible avenue. Might be having a structural engineer provide a report stating how the removal and replacement is going to be done. I think I'm a little hesitant to provide specific language at the moment. I think this is something I would probably want to, if the board wants to go here, I would recommend you request additional information from staff and the applicant. We could return after consultations with the City of Westland building official, the city attorney, and the applicant, and that way we can come back to you with some sort of agreed upon condition that the applicant would be willing to accept, and that we could affirmatively tell the board this will solve this problem. I know I've also been in communication with other cities, such as City of Salem, as to how they condition projects like this. So this is one of those back burner items staff has been working on developing our standard conditions of approval, given recent HRB conversations about the matter, and I just don't have one I can pull out of my hat at this moment. So I know the applicant is eager to get going, but the application only came in January. It's 2 months later. We're actually right in front of you. I think a month's delay is going to be maybe inconvenient to the applicant, but I think would put everyone on safer ground. And I would maybe just I would encourage the board to consider that. And if Bill wants to add anything more, I'll turn it over to him. But thank you.
Well, I think John's correct that some additional information is necessary in order to form the condition that would comply with the board's wishes and also be acceptable to the applicant. So we would need to, if we are going to provide additional time, we need to continue to a date certain so we avoid notice requirements. Perhaps this would be a good time to ask the applicant whether 1 month is a suitable amount of time or whether they think that something could be done in a shorter period of time, again, to choose that date certain before you leave the meeting tonight.
I'm not sure what we need to provide, what additional you would like us to provide.
Again, I think that would be the difficulty, because you're essentially asking for some kind of guarantee or an assurance that's based on construction methods. And I'm not really sure what we could provide to you as the applicant or the architect that would satisfy that.
So sorry to jump in here, Jessica. You had mentioned a second ago that part of the interior renovations are going to include some structural lateral supports. Is that something that you can share with us of what's going to happen? Because if, you know, Tom's got his hand up as the resident architect, but that might, you know, be satisfactory, I guess, would be a way if we knew what was happening on the inside, so we can ensure that when, you know, I hate to say siding is structural, but siding can be structural in these old constructions where you go a couple stories high, right? It's part of the shear. So with what you are doing inside might be able to satisfy my concern and others' concerns of you pull the siding off in the building racks, right?
Right. So yes, so part of what we're doing is the front facade is going to receive plywood below the siding, below the new siding. So the interior modifications, we're removing some walls and opening up some walls. And in the process of doing that, we're basically required to do a structural analysis and provide lateral reinforcing in both directions. So both that front facade wall, a wall on the back of the building, and some interior walls are going to become shear walls. So they will have plywood on one or both sides. So we're doing that. We're also doing some reinforcing connections with some of the existing beams and just upgrading some of the connections that now are exposed that we can see need some help. So we are going to be doing that as part of the work. Again, to me, though, that's different than trying to address the valid concern of construction means and how that's going to be done in terms of when that siding comes up, because you're right that existing siding can become part of the lateral, you know, retaining system. But how that's done really is something that we're concerned with, and we would be, you know, involved with to some extent, but it's really something that the contractor has to identify and determine how they're going to do that. In this case, I would imagine it would just be doing small parts of the siding at a time. So you're not tearing off all the siding and then replacing it all at once. But I can't specifically identify how that will be done.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, you had your hand up. Did you have a question? Or
Yeah, no, I kind of want to follow up with what Jessica's talking about. Well, first of all, we have to recall or remember that our job is to stand outside and look at it, make sure that it fits into the neighborhood. And so I can understand Jessica's concern with regards to putting just I guess I can ask Jessica a question. You've already answered it, but I'm just going to ask you again. So this project is going through the permit process, and it sounds like it's had because you're kind of opening some things up, that there's been a lateral analysis, and that it's going to be laterally engineered as part of the permit process. And so I guess that should let all of us recognize that there's an engineer's name on this that says, first of all, it's going to stand up in an earthquake better than it is today, because they're retrofitting it for lateral pressures, side-to-side pressures on it. And is that correct, Jessica?
That is correct.
Okay, I don't want to put words in your mouth. And so this building is being updated to, at that point, 2021 state code for earthquakes compliance. And so in my business, when somebody does that to an old building, which I have clients that do it all the time, the cool part for them is yeah, it costs money up front, but when they go to sell it, they can tell the bank this thing is up to earthquake code. It's not an old building. It's been brought up to today's code, which you don't see. It's all done inside structurally and things like that. So I feel confident based on that part of what Jessica's been talking about, that this building's not going to go anywhere. There's a business that's going to continue to try to do business during the construction, it looks like. I just wanted to kind of put my 2 cents into the structural side of things. And I'm not going to say that when you pull the siding off that it's not going to get weaker. But I got to believe that if there's an engineer involved, and they're going to be stiffening the whole thing, what sounds like the whole front facade will now have plywood sheathing on it, I guess. I don't know how you're going to do that with the windows and stuff, but I guess that's to be decided. I feel comfortable with what you're saying. That's my statement, I guess.
Floyd, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to respond earlier to some of Jessica's comments about confusion about what to provide. I think if I was quoting her correctly, I just think what I was trying to say earlier is that through the continuance, we could actually work something out, sort of because I don't have the building official here in front of me. So, and that's just, I think the idea was if the board was willing to give us some flexibility in what we returned with, just that you want this issue investigated and addressed and have it and create a path for them to clearly respond to your concerns. That could be something that could be done here and may become a template for future applications. Unfortunately, this would be the first one we do. So again, the discretion is yours tonight, but I would just I just want to make it clear that the end product could be could take any number of forms. So you don't have to specify something tonight. So
I think, and John, and to address one of Jessica's concern is that the board, we do have the jurisdiction. I mean, part of the rule says that they need to keep the siding there, and if we're giving permission for siding to be ripped down, I think that's where our concern is. It's not necessarily the method in which the construction contractor decides to go about it. It's the fact that we're going to give the permission to take all the siding off. Then we become, liable in the fact that the building falls down. We didn't do our due diligence to keep the siding up there as a board. I think that's where our jurisdiction is. What I'm concerned about is that we give the permission to rip the siding down and the building falls down. We didn't stipulate that, oh, if you're going to take the siding on, you got to keep the building up. And that's already happened. We can say, oh, it's never going to happen. It's happened already in this district, multiple occasions where siding has come down and the building has fallen down. So that's where I think we're concerned about it. James, did you have your hand up? Is that a new one or is that your?
Yeah, no, it's a new one. It's a new one. Sorry. That, Danny, you just hit a note saying we're giving permission to take this siding off, replace, reuse, whatever it is. We're giving permission to take this off. We should be able to give permission to take off sections at a time, not all at a time. Okay. Also, I'm way happy with what Jessica said, and then what Tom followed up with is I do understand that there is going to be an engineer that buys off on this plan to reinforce the lateral of this building. Okay, I'm good with that. At one point, we talked about timing of all this going to happen, and this might be a question for you, Tim. You've already got permits going in for the interior of the building. Is that going to be completed? Those lateral, reinforcements, are those going to be completed before the siders come in and take siding off? Because we can stipulate that, or we can delay this, which I don't want to do. We can delay this for a month and you get your other approved and you're already a month ahead inside,
Actually, we're going to try to move as fast on the inside as we can. And the delay is actually going to be the outside. We understand that we won't be able to use the new inside until the outside is completed, and so that's part of our push here. So we're very motivated to keep the ball rolling here, and we definitely have had an engineer look at at all the sheer strengths, and we're real sincere about getting this right. What Tom indicated is correct. This adds value to the building, and we're all about that.
Right. My only
one
concern
other
with,
quick thing, I maybe this is out of order. I don't mean it to be, but we did have a problem on the end of the street as we've indicated, but that was not a result of taking off siding. That was actually a different issue. And what we tried to do, and what we frankly did do, is take all the siding that we could off of that building. We replaned it, and if you walked into 1705, you'll notice the entire back wall from the floor through 2 stories is the exterior siding that we saved from when the building fell down. We could certainly reutilize some of the exterior siding that we're going to pull off to the extent that we can get any decent sized boards. If you look in there, you'll also notice none of those are much longer than 4 or 5 feet because of the difficulty of saving siding. But we replaned it and we reused it, and we'd be happy to do that with the siding that we're going to take off of this one as well. We're not going to drop it, and we're going to get this right. We're very sincere about that.
okay. So I do appreciate that comment. I do like reusing old wood in projects, so I do like that. My concern still is the timing of the interior improvements versus pulling the outside apart, right? You're doing the right thing by having the engineer and the laterals and creating shear walls. I 100% agree with that, but if you pull the siding off the front of the building before any of that's done, it could be bad, right?
No, we're definitely going to do the inside first.
Okay. So Danny, can we stipulate that we approve this, but it doesn't, they can't, not the construction methods, but the staging or the timing of the 2 different projects, because they are 2 different projects. There's actually a third with the sides and the back also.
So that's probably John Floyd or Bill to ask that question or address that answer. Can we put that stipulation on it?
You could, but again, we don't actually have any of the building permit materials or structural reports in the record. So we're kind of going off of verbal conversations here, and that comes back to my earlier recommendation to give us time to work with the city engineer. I'm sorry, the city building official on this. So
that's basically
so one alternative perhaps would be if the applicant were willing to allow a continuance of, let's say, 2 weeks, to allow for at least a conversation with the building official and representative of the applicant, and perhaps something from the record of that interior application could be brought forward and put into the record, and the board could make a determination that the sequencing of activity would be consistent with whatever. Maybe there's a memo that's written by the applicant that's agreed to by the building official, and that can just be a commitment that is a foundation to the approval by the board. Could that be done in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and not in an inappropriate way, not delay the project?
Would that require
I'm
then
not
another
sure if
hearing?
that's a question for me or for the applicant. I'd be happy to work with John to try to determine exactly what we could do or what we could provide. Again, I'm still a little just unclear as to what that needs to be, but I'd be happy to work with John, and I would hope that we could, whatever it is that we need to do, we could get in 2 weeks, although I don't know that the building permit review process, I don't know where it will be in 2 weeks. We just submitted very recently, so.
yeah, I would say so the next regularly scheduled meeting of the HRB is April 19th. And so that would actually give us 4 weeks before the agenda goes out for the next meeting. So, that's some time to work out some sort of demonstration, either of condition language or some sort of report that would satisfy the building official. Yeah, so I think Bill, so the city attorney there, I think perhaps we have more than more than 2 weeks on that, but yeah.
So my suggestion was just to try to expedite things if that were at all possible. But if that's not possible, it sounds like to make sure we don't have a further continuance, it might be best to continue to April 19th, and perhaps the board could make a commitment to put this as the earliest item on the agenda, just for the purpose of discussing this particular aspect before the board goes into deliberations.
Do we need a motion then from one of the board members?
Well, but first you're going to want to close the public hearing and go back into deliberations because we had reopened the public hearing.
Do we need to continue the public hearing though to leave the record open?
Yes, we'd have to do that. Yeah.
So does that make
What
that?
you'd be doing is you'd be continuing the public hearing. That would allow the opportunity for the discussions to take place outside of this hearing, and then something to be brought back, perhaps a modified staff report with a proposed draft condition, and that draft condition could be the subject of the continuance.
So therefore, so what I'm basically looking at I would be option one. I would need a motion for continuance of the public hearing to a date certain, or to leave the record open for at least, well, it says on here for at least 7 days from today. So basically, we would need a motion to continue the hearing to April 19th at 6 p.m., leaving the record open for written testimony.
Well, actually, continuing to the public hearing would be to that date would be appropriate, and then the staff would bring back a modified staff report with whatever proposed condition can be drafted. That would be my recommendation, rather than to continue to keep the record open, because if you keep the record open, that would be allowing for submission of various documents. It sounds like the board's and the applicant's intent is to have some meaningful discussions between now and then. So the report by the staff would be best, and then there could be the opportunity for comment by the applicant and others on what new materials are brought back.
So we need to put a date for closing the record then?
No, would be setting a date for the continuance to April 19th.
Okay.
At 6 p.m.
If I could just interject here, is it possible to keep the record open only on items of relevance to this particular issue?
Yes, you can certainly stipulate to that if that's a concern. Yes.
Yes, I think that way perhaps the applicant could enter new information about this or other parties, but only relevant to the sort of structural integrity and accidental failure of the building, so just to keep some flexibility open in
Yes,
the
that's what
response.
the board wants to limit it to. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm looking from the board for that motion. Scott Irwin, did you have your hand up, or Tom Watton? I see hands up. I didn't know if those are new or old.
First off, I would just like to compliment Tom on his shirt. I think he has excellent taste. I mean, the one thing that was brought up earlier was the materials used for the siding on the side and the back of the building, and I was thinking, are we able to integrate that so that way we could just, I guess, complete this application with the additional discussion regarding structural integrity methods, and that way we can just pull it all nice together. Are we able to do that? And then maybe Tim and Jessica would be happier with pushing this out a month.
So if I could comment, what I heard earlier in the hearing from staff was that the siding is not part of the jurisdiction. I'm sorry, the side of the building, the sides of the building and the rear of the building are not subject, or are they? I guess they are subject. However, that would require a modification to the application, which would require renotice, and that would delay the application further. So it seems that it's best to keep that as a separate, different application.
And we reopened the meeting just for this one item, and that would not
That is
tie
correct.
in.
Tom, is your hand up again, or is that from before? Tom Watton.
My hand's up. I guess a couple of things. So, Jessica, just a question for you, with regards to permits that have been applied for the entire structure. We'll say not necessarily just the front facade, but those have just recently been applied for. Is that correct?
That is correct. Within the last 2 weeks.
Okay. And the only reason why I ask is if they were further along or something like that, then I'm just thinking about the structural side of things. And the other question I have, and I'm not sure, Bill, if this is a question for you, but I think I brought it up a little bit earlier. What as our body, as a historical review board, what level do we have on asking what we're really asking for right now? Since we're asking for structural integrity questions that kind of potentially kind of are outside of our jurisdiction on facade.
Well, as the chair stated, the issue is the exterior siding. So I think we'd have to frame things within the approval of the commission on the exterior siding, the type allowed, and again, I'm seeing this discussion of the structural integrity and the interior application for the building code review to bring in some comment from the building official that they're comfortable with the method of replacing the exterior siding is somehow woven into to the other approval. I'm just reacting to what I'm hearing here. I'm not totally sure I'm comfortable with my comments, but I'm basing them on what I've heard. Perhaps John's got some more information because he's more familiar with what the building official's role is in this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
John.
if I could just pop in here, I think so. What I'm imagining in my head right now is talking with the building official to verify that that this is this is definitely part of the interior TI improvements. It sounds like it is. We'll just verify what the application actually demonstrates and report back, or identify what sort of report or information would be required, for him to verify that this is a non-issue. So saying, and if it's not available by the next meeting, we could write conditions saying applicant shall present X to the city for review and approval by the building official. So I think it's those two things, and we would do that in concert with the applicant to make sure that they're comfortable with that requirement.
So John, wouldn't it tie into demolition by neglect though, is what that's the portion of the code that
That's correct.
This too. So Bill was trying to look for how this would tie together, and I think it's the demolition by neglect. We don't want that to happen.
Yes.
And that's where this question comes from. So whatever staff looks for from Jessica and Tim should tie back to demolition from neglect, not, hey, we just want a structural engineer to say we're cool, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah, and I agree. But our so yeah, that is the basis of this condition and requirement that we're talking about this, and that's chapter CDC 25.130, and that which covers demolition. But yeah, so apologies if that wasn't clear. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
And Tom, did you have your hand up again, or is that from previous?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Scott, I see your hand is up also.
Yeah, I mean, also, just looking at the broader purpose, 25010 sub G, provide regulations that will ensure the preservation of the quality of historic integrity of historic resources and their site. So, I mean, right there from the foundations, of the authority given to us, we can stipulate, how it's going to go to make sure that the methodology of the restoration and update, is going to ensure that, yeah, face doesn't fall down on itself here. So, I mean, I know Tim and Jessica, you guys are eager to get rolling with this, and we would, we definitely want to support this project, but we want to make sure that we're laying down the appropriate conditions with the appropriate language, with the appropriate expert information, so that way all the words fall into place and translate well into the final product. And so I really hope you guys understand the patience and the extra due diligence that we're requesting of you guys.
And John, I see your hand still up. I don't know if you had another comment.
Sorry,
No,
that's not on purpose.
So at this point, in the process, we're at the point of addressing questions of continuance. And if we want to request a continuance at the public hearing, at this point, I would need a motion from one of the board members to have that continuance to a certain date and to leave the record open.
I move that we continue the public hearing to our meeting April 19th. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
That's correct.
Okay, then that's my motion. We continue the public meeting to our meeting on April the 19th.
And leave the record open for comment on this particular portion of the.
Yeah, I think the public meeting's still open, so I think it's that might be understood. Bill? I thought that was understood. Maybe not. If so, then yes.
Well, I think the question, Commissioner Steele, Board Member Steele, is whether or not the record is going to remain open specific to just this one item, or is it going to be left open
Yeah.
universally?
Okay. Yeah, then I would stipulate it's to address this one item. I understand what you're saying. Okay. This is the issue we want settled, not anything else.
And anyone second on that? John Steele.
I'll second it.
All right. Any discussion on this? All right. From the board, all in favor? Do we need a roll call on this, or is it just all in favor? John or Bill?
I think a roll call would be best.
All right, Linn or John, if you want to do a roll call vote on our motion for continuance.
John, do you want me to do that?
Go ahead. Sorry, I was muted. So go. Yeah.
Okay. Member Irwin.
Yes.
Member Manning.
Aye.
Member Owens.
Aye.
Member Steele.
Aye.
Member Taylor.
Yes.
Member Schreiber.
And I on that too.
Member
So
Watton.
oh,
Member Watton, are you still here?
Yep. No.
All right. I heard 6-1.
sounds as though we have majority in favor of continuing to April 19th at 6 p.m. So the record will remain open for testimony on this particular item until that date of April 19th at 6 p.m. I think that then concludes this portion of our meeting for now. Is that correct? So we move on from there. I guess that we'll see everybody back on April 19th for that portion of it. Our next item on our agenda is items of interest from the board. And this is for any of the board members. And at this point, our guests, if you want to drop off, you can. You're welcome to stay as well.
Thank you.
Any items of interest from the board not related to our public hearing? I got one thing just to share. the Westland Historical Society has published its first printed magazine. John wrote a very nice article in there for the Historic Review Board. We'll get copies of all of this to all the board members so they can see the nice article written by John. So thank you, John, for submitting that and helping to promote HRB with the Historical Society members.
I want my copy autographed.
Have John sign it.
Can do.
I'm sure John F. did a much better job than John S. would have. Who mistakenly got asked first.
Oh,
The
well,
Historical
thank you.
Society has asked us to submit again for the next issue, and I think John and I came up with some ideas to keep that in there. We thought it's a great way to do some free public outreach and promote what we as the Historic Resources Board are doing, and then the importance and significance of what's going on in the neighborhood. So we will have that space again.
Yeah.
And if the board has ideas of things to submit for the Historical Society Journal, they're giving us a space, so we might as well use it.
Danny,
the postcards and letters that we were talking about a couple months ago, why don't we just put that in there?
We certainly could. I mean, it's a printed form. It also goes out as an email as well. So if we end up putting a letter in there, we'll miss the email part of it. They have 700 people on their mailing list for the Historical Society.
Yeah,
so it'll go out to all of them. But
what's the deadline for the next item, if you remember, Chair Schreiber?
I think it's April 1st.
Okay, of course.
Yeah.
So
right around the corner.
No joke. Okay, so yeah.
Literally, I think that's what it is. But I'm sure they can talk to the board, talk to the Historical Society. I'm sure they can probably extend that. I don't remember.
Okay.
Considering this one was supposed to have been printed, January 31st, and it was printed this week, so they're slightly behind on their schedule too.
So I'm sure COVID has affected that. So,
yeah.
To do a swimsuit edition for the summer.
We'll put you in as a centerfold right there.
Okay.
Is that the board in swimsuits?
Yeah, we could do a calendar.
Yeah. Get a few more members on the board. Everybody have their own one.
Oh gosh.
This is the point where the city attorney needs to get us back on
Yeah.
track.
Yeah. So I will bring copies of all of this for all the board members. You guys get physical hard copies to look at for this one. The future editions apparently are going to be for members only, but for this first one, they're doing it for any stakeholders in the city. Any other comments or any other board items of interest for the board? If not, we can move to items of interest from staff, and then maybe you can address what James was asking about the status of our outreach and other things. I know Lynn has some updates too.
Yeah. So I think in terms of this, for me, I'll go fast. Just so tomorrow, just a couple of weeks ago, the HRB made a recommendation to the Planning Commission regarding the food cart pod there at the old gas station. That goes before the Planning Commission tomorrow night. So just want to confirm that for the board in case you were tracking that or interested in going. Anyone wishing to testify at that hearing needs to sign up by noon tomorrow, if I recall correctly, Lynn. So you need to request that from request a link from staff by noon tomorrow. What else? Let's see here.
If I may inject.
Yes.
So also, the inside line is that there will only be 5 of the 7 at the Planning Commission potentially voting tomorrow. So
that's our current understanding. So.
Yeah, so it could be a tight vote. So I guess if you got anything to say to support our business, then please make the time.
Okay. Yep. So and then unless there are any questions on that, we're lining up potentially April 20th as the first Planning Commission public hearing for the HRB. I'm sorry, for the Chapter 25 and 58 code amendments. And so that's something that we'll get started there late next month. So just a heads up on that. And finally get those moving through formal adoption after several years of discussion. And then the third item is that I received a call this week about a potential conversion of one of the bungalows on Willamette Falls Drive of being converted into a restaurant. So don't know if this is the one by the Methodist Church. So don't know if that's going to gain any traction, but I did field a call about that. So just wanted to put that out there. It's not one of the listed structures, but it's it's a conversion as opposed to demolition. But again, it was just an inquiry. It's not an application. So, but just wanted to put that out there as it. If that were to occur, it's likely the external changes would trigger Class 2 design review. So I think that's all I have, unless anyone has any questions for me about those items.
Yeah, I'd love to get a status report of the house project, as I know Betty left, and then an update on the outreach, basically part of the grant funding.
Okay. So I think, Lynn, did you have anything you can provide on that? So.
So I took over the project from Betty, both the virtual tour and map and the educational materials. I will have both updates to give to the HRB at the April 19th meeting. I have pretty much filled out the historic map, virtual tour map, although I'm still waiting for some more information from our partners to put in more information. So I think that's ready for your review. And then the educational materials, I put together an outline of what I gleaned from the previous meeting about what you wanted. And I'll have a presentation for you then and seeking your guidance to move forward on that.
So that'll be April 19th.
Yes.
For that. Perfect. Thank you. And John, I just wanted to make a quick note. For future applications, if someone's looking for historic photos, you might want to recommend they reach out to the Clackamas County Historical Society, the Oregon Historical Society. The Westland Historical Society has no photo records.
Okay.
None. We've got, well, basically what we've collected so far in the current photos, we own none of them at all. So just to help applicants, it may be better for them to go reach out to the Clackamas County, because prior to 2014, all Westland historic records were held and are currently held over at Clackamas County Historical Society.
Good to know. I will direct applicants that direction.
It may just help them a little bit on their research for their purposes, which is what I told them when they called us at the Historical Society. So, but just FYI, we unfortunately don't have that. We're looking for it. We'd like to start building it, but we're starting from scratch.
Okay, duly noted. So thank you.
Yeah, but I told that to Jessica when she reached out to us too. So, any other items of note from anybody? If not, we can probably adjourn and we will reconvene. It looks like April 19th. If that's it. So, John, are we in person? What's the status?
I will confirm prior to the meeting, but it appears it's going to be an in-person hybrid meeting. So you'll have the option of attending in person or virtually. I know there's some split opinions on that in different comfort levels. So
Danny be able to bring his background into the city.
It's attached to me. It just follows me around. So
we'll see what we can do. So we're anticipating in person, but we'll sort of verify that with you a few weeks ahead of time. Everything's in flux right now, so what I say now may not be true 2 weeks from now, as you know, the last couple of years have been very unpredictable. So
are we in chambers then, or where do we meet?
TBD. So I will let you know. So yeah.
So historically, the HRB has convened in the Bolton room when you don't have a quasi-judicial hearing. But if you do have a quasi-judicial hearing, you'll be in the chambers. We've reserved the Bolton room for HRB on Tuesdays, the third Tuesdays of the month.
And you could do the hybrid thing from there?
Well, I can still run the meeting from my desk. I don't have to be there. But John, whoever's the staff liaison will have to log in and run the meeting.
Yeah.
Do kind of a double time there.
Yeah. So, yeah. Details forthcoming, but it's most likely as before. So, as Linn noted. So.
Okay, good. Excellent. Anything else from anyone on that? Thank you all for your time and your input on all that. James, go ahead.
So I received my state form that I have to fill out, for conflict of interest and things like that. But their link isn't working. Is there a place that I can download that and mail it in like the good old days? Or I sent them an email saying, hey, this link isn't working, but.
Okay, let me check with the city recorder on that. I know she and I talked about that recently. I will follow up with you individually. So
okay.
Afterwards. So
Hey James, I was able to go through the process and submit today on that.
On the link?
Yeah.
Huh, right before the meeting.
I'm an existing member. Maybe that might be the difference.
Yeah, that might be the difference.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't get that yet. Shouldn't I be getting that form, John Floyd?
let me believe so, but let me.
Danny, mine came today.
Okay, in email. It was on the email.
Yeah.
I'll have to check my junk. I know I got my wrist slap last year for being late, so
It usually comes out about now, a month before it's due, and really, I do not believe there's any mail-in option anymore. I think it's all electronic, and you'd have to recharge your token, call the number, and get your token reissued by them.
okay. Oh, I found it. It was in spam. All right. Thank you, everyone, for telling me.
Yeah, I don't have a token, so.
You don't have a token?
No.
They send you a token.
Okay. No, I don't have a token.
Okay.
Okay. I will follow up with you tomorrow on this, and we'll get it straightened out. So, yeah.
All right.
Apologies
Thank
on
you.
that.
No problem.